work as a GIS consultant for a geophysical exploration company. We find oil and gas all over the world, and we work with the operators so that they can drill and produce efficiently. And data is an integral part of that, so it ties into the Bigfoot Mapping project. I saw a parallel where I could use my mapping abilities and background to catalog and create a central repository for data relating to Bigfoot sightings and encounters, and make it measurable and quantifiable, and create a standard database or a data set that we can apply big data concepts and principles. Hopefully, we grow and we can eliminate the outliers and really distill down all those sightings and the information we get in those reports so that we can identify trends and valuable information from what everyone has experienced, and we can start to quantify that, measure it, and get analysis done so that we can turn these reports into actionable information. In college, I went to SUNY Cortland. It's a great school with great professors. I've got to mention that because it was a wonderful time. And had I not gone there, I wouldn't have ever even known what GIS was, and Geographic Information Systems. And one of my professors got me into it, and here I am today with a Bachelor's of Science from SUNY Cortland, and we're online making maps and capturing data about Bigfoot. It's wonderful. When I was first conceiving of the Bigfoot Mapping project, I reflected back on a sighting I had, or an encounter I had, when I was a teenager in the Hudson Highlands. My friend Tim Joyce and I, hopefully he's not going to get mad if I use his full name, Jim Toyce, we'll reverse the letters. We were hiking on Mount Beacon, and we were on the backside of the reservoir. And when we rounded the corner, we came upon a tree that was just shaking violently. And it sounded like a silverback gorilla was screaming at us. So he and I both looked at each other, being teenagers and scared, and neither of us were too embarrassed to run down the entire mountain. So ever since then, I was convinced that Bigfoot was out there, and later on I wanted to contribute to learning more about the species, and that sighting really propelled me in the direction of applying my education and my experience to creating the Bigfoot Mapping project, where we can map Bigfoot encounters. The Hudson Valley's Beacon specifically has a legend of Little Bigfoot, and there's been some documentaries there that have interviewed other people who have had sightings, and the Hudson Valley itself has a deep history with unexplained or mysterious occurrences, and most of the time it's related to Bigfoot. There are many sightings in the area, and it's a big presence in the Catskills specifically, and in the Hudson Highlands, and there's the Adirondacks as well. The Adirondacks are the second largest state park in the nation, thousands and thousands of acres of hardwoods and lakes, and it's just a giant ecosystem. So there's a lot of activity in the area. My sighting was the very first sighting that was entered into the database. It was a great test case because it was a genuine, authentic piece of information that we could get in, and I wanted to make sure it worked, and who doesn't like to be first? So we got it into the map and documented it, and tested out the crowdsourcing, which is a big aspect of the Bigfoot Mapping project. We found that there was a need for a place where people could get their information right into the map. When you go online and you start to do research, there's not always a place to go and see easily and interpret or digest data without reading pages and pages of reports. And a map puts those data points right in front of you. Maps tell a story immediately when you see them. So when you log into the Bigfoot Mapping project and you hit the home page and you jump to the interactive map, I mean, it makes sense. The Hudson Valley is apple country. There's the Marlboro in Orange County on the west side of the Hudson River is full of apple orchards. So there's just hundreds and hundreds of acres of apples growing and pumpkins and corn. So in terms of food, you could just walk through the county and pick out what you want to eat, and Bigfoot would be very, very well fed in that area. And not to mention the local vegetation that grows nuts and berries and practically year round. It's it's just a smorgasbord of food in that area. One of my favorite things to do is walk around and pick a birch twig and chew on it because it tastes like root beer. So if Bigfoot has a sweet tooth, he can even quench that. There's two different ways we catalog in the Bigfoot Mapping Project. There's historical sightings, which are gathered from many sources throughout the internet. So we scrape and go through and organize and standardize those sightings. And those historical sightings that we've got are about 7,500 in total. And then we have a crowdsourcing survey where sightings can be submitted. And since we just started in February of this year, we have about 100 sightings that have been submitted. So it's actually a pretty good average, gets good interaction. One thing we run into is people are nervous to post their sightings because they don't want to give away a specific location or endanger an animal that may be out there, and provide a location where people might be able to easily visit or trespass to go there. So we're overcoming that, but overall the response has been very good, and people have contributed amazing stories and amazing information. There's from Alaska all the way to Australia. We have sightings that have been submitted with amazing detailed information that people are very willing to share, and we're grateful for it. It'll further our initiative. We have seen some patterns in the reports where Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whatever it's regionally known as, concentrates around streams and valleys, and specifically also peaks of mountains, high elevation. We need to do further analysis on it as we get more sightings, but out of the data set that we've analyzed so far, it makes sense that they would be around water sources and perhaps in places where people can't easily access, so high peaks, high elevations, dense forests, no trails, or stream areas where they need to get food or drink or water. So it's very noticeable that they concentrate around those areas. I haven't looked to see if there's been sightings around power lines, but that's interesting because that leads back to what maps can do. Maps open up a whole new world of analysis. We can tie so much data and so many features to geography, utilities, pipelines, soil types, precipitation, seasonal temperatures, the way we can enrich the data and perform analysis that if it were just verbal reports without a location or a timestamp, we wouldn't be able to tie that all together. Now we can, and we can enrich that data and add to it and glean and distill down information that might not have been easily accessible at the surface or throughout the periods of time that these sightings happen, over decades. We can now see them in one place in a static map where you can tie information and get historical data or different topographic maps, aerial imagery. We can look at historical imagery to match the time of the sighting. The ability to analyze these sightings and get a story from the map that tells you more about the species is endless. There are so many avenues where we can just be informed in new ways, where we just couldn't before until we had this mapping technology easily accessible. And we're just getting into that where it's available. Esri, if I can use their name, I hope, is a wonderful, amazing company. Their technology is available online. They released it, and it's a cloud-based mapping service. And without it, it wouldn't be possible. So we're just stepping into the future in the ability for the general public to now start to use these tools that were available to private companies or the government, for example, and we can apply it to all new sciences and all new studies, not just Bigfoot. So we're really advancing in our ability to find out what we want to find out about our world and Bigfoot specifically. Based on our mapping and our analysis so far, it's always evolving, but the most likely place that a person is going to see Sasquatch or experience an encounter would be somewhere that's densely forested. It's very obvious on the map when you look at the regions in the United States. You can see Ohio, Pittsburgh area, the Appalachians. Then you go into the Ouachita Mountains in Oklahoma, and you can look at practically every mountain range that has, or forest that has dense vegetation and a low population center is going to be a hotspot in general for Bigfoot sightings. It's very obvious on the map when you look at it. The number one state is, I bet you could guess it, Washington is the number one state for Bigfoot sightings. It is practically just one big hotspot. I think there's 800, at the time I did the analysis, 866 sightings in Washington state alone. And then when you start to go down the coast to Washington, Oregon, California, the whole Pacific region becomes just a hotbed for Bigfoot activity and Bigfoot sightings, you name it. Bigfoot thrives here, and it's obvious from the submissions we get. One of my biggest takeaways from starting the Bigfoot Mapping project is how many people have had experiences that, because of places where they couldn't access somewhere to report or somebody to talk to, or they didn't feel comfortable, now they have it. So the biggest takeaway would be that it's a big anthropological movement. It's just not just about Bigfoot. It's about the impact it's had on the culture, and you can take that away from the stories people have to tell. So yes, Bigfoot Mapping Project is about data, and we are information driven, but it's hard to ignore the impact that encountering a Bigfoot has on the people. And when I set out starting the project, I did not expect to get such emotional and impactful reports. I expected people to be pretty dry and, fill out my survey. From a data analyst perspective, I expect data. And when I think about that, it's information to me. It's how tall was Bigfoot? 7.1, feet. And they looked like they weighed 300 pounds. But then we go into the section where there's a story to tell. And I just get drawn into the impact that these sightings have had on people's lives and how important they think it is to get it out there and share with people. And this gives them a platform for that. Hopefully it really contributes to the community, and that's been the biggest takeaway. We really start to see the people side of Bigfoot through a map, which is unexpected. When you look at data and you just look at sheer numbers and probability, there's no way that all of these reports can be a bear or a mistake that somebody misidentified a bobcat or didn't understand what tree knocks were, etc. The data and the sheer number of reports and the consistency through the descriptions of what people are seeing or hearing or finding, footprints, for example, the data tells us that there's something out there. Call it Bigfoot, call it Sasquatch. There's something out there among us in the forests, in the places you see on the map here, that it's there. And we just need to understand it, and this is how we start, through studying. The biggest thing that I would like to add or ask of anybody watching the documentary would be to encourage anybody they know or themselves to contribute if they've had an experience, because the more data and the more information we have, the better we can understand the species, protect the species, be more informed, and be proactive. Just because there's no physical specimens or we haven't had hard evidence that's accepted by the scientific community at large doesn't mean we can't start to be ready for and be proactive for how to accept Bigfoot into the mainstream. So get out there, get hiking, and get information into the map, because with more information, the better we can do. So that's where you get into borders are imaginary, right? So Bigfoot doesn't know our state borders. It doesn't know what county they're in or where they're traveling. It's when you look at Rhode Island. I'll zoom in here real quick. It doesn't know. So you start to look. That's where you start to look at local environment, local regional ecosystems, and what would attract a Bigfoot there. And one of the things that I draw a parallel to is in Canada there are coastal wolves, right? You wouldn't expect to see a wolf on the coast, and they eat all this coastal. They eat fish. You wouldn't expect that ever. And Bigfoot, just like any other animal, great example is the wolf, would adapt. So if you're on a seashore, he might be eating clams, might be eating fish, crabs. There's so much available food there, and there are so many remote places along a shoreline, marshes, for example, or cliffs and rock faces to hide in along the shoreline. So I would expect Bigfoot, just like any other species, to adapt to their local ecosystem and start to diversify. Might be the same genus, a different species, or just differences between the same species. We will start to learn. So to answer the question about Rhode Island, I think that Bigfoot just roams where there's food and finds it and is very resourceful and will eat what it can find and hide from people the best it can. Bigfoot Mapping project is entirely funded by my allowance that my girlfriend lets me have. So it's a passion project. She's very supportive. Thank you, Caroline. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank her. She's very encouraging and very supportive. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here today talking to you guys. So the Bigfoot Mapping project is funded by myself and the sticker sales, of which I've made 2 so far. So it's a humble project with big ambitions.